Good morning, good evening, namaste, hola, bonjour, and mahraban. This is Namya Joshi, your host for the day. Welcome to episode 26 of the podcast Each One Teach 10, an amazing world of STEM, an inspiring venture where we'll be discussing that STEM is part of every day for every kid. We all will learn together how to build a STEM culture. For today, we have Mr. Sean Arnold, who is a special educator and STEM coach in New York City's District 75, citywide special education. He works with a broad range of students and educators, and he is committed to reaching all students through innovative technology and practices. He has received the ISTE Outstanding Teacher Award, ISTE Inclusive Learning Network Outstanding Educator Award, along with many other accolades and certifications. So, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. Your introduction is it addresses more cultures and language than I can speak. I'm stuck with like three languages, maybe at best.
That's cool to know. Like, I know about four languages.
Yeah. You got me beat by a good margin. And even the two other ones other than English that I speak, I can hold a conversation in Spanish and Portuguese, but
Okay,
I'm by no means a native speaker.
nice. Like, I know a little bit of Spanish. Like, I think it's gracias.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
de nada.
Thank you.
I know that.
And of nothing, or yeah. All right, my Spanish got a lot better over this last year while I was working with a lot of Spanish speaking students here in New York City. Like you said, I work here in New York City in District 75, so I work with one students with moderate to higher needs disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to have a lot of tools available to them, but because it's New York City, we're sort of a melting pot of cultures. Queens, where I live, is the most diverse county in the United States of America, with people who come from all over the world here in Queens. So it's really nice. There's like hundreds, literally hundreds of languages spoken in the city,
Right, it's like a
and I
very diversified area where you're living in.
yeah, it's awesome because on one end, I get to have all kinds of different food every day of the week wherever I want to go to, and it's everywhere, every place I want to go. But it's also a challenge as an educator because I have to familiarize myself with different cultures and different
Mm-hmm.
spaces in the world, and there's certain places where, for example, the expectation in America is like, oh, look at your teacher when they're talking to you, and that's a sign of respect. But in certain other areas of the world, I know, don't look at your elders because that's a sign of disrespect if you're staring me in the eye. So I have to familiarize myself with that because I have students coming from all over the world.
Oh, that's good to know. Our audience here are eagerly waiting to know more about you. So, can you please tell us more about yourself, Sean?
Sure. So I've been working in New York City schools for, I think this last year was my 17th year in New York City schools in District 75. So I've been doing it for a bit. And because I work with students with disabilities, a lot of my passions have to do with accessibility and inclusive learning for those students. And a lot of that has to do with digital technologies because in many spaces, my students literally have a voice because of technology in places that they wouldn't otherwise. So I have nonverbal students who might carry around an iPad with them because that's how they communicate. I have students in wheelchairs who have mobility and access to learning and information simply because of the technology that's available to them. And then otherwise, I was never a big fan of a lot of school. And I honestly didn't want to be a teacher when I was growing up at all because I thought school was so boring. I had some great teachers, don't get me wrong. I had some who were really great. But by and large, it was really boring and just rote practice for me. And so I try to engage my students in the kind of learning that I've always thought was cool. A lot of hands-on, project-based learning kind of stuff. Yes, related to STEM, but also playing games. I'm big into game-based learning and the sort of playful learning that we do when we're in kindergarten. And apparently they do it like the MIT Learning Lab at like the top universities, but somehow it gets lost in between, which is, I don't know, a little sad.
Right. And I completely love the way you follow your passion for teaching the students which are specially abled and bringing them the voice that they require. And also, I think the classes do become boring when it's just text learning. But when it
Oh,
comes to STEM and game based learning, it becomes like a different scenario, and everybody gets engaged and they're like hyped up to learn because the way we're learning with text and with games and STEM is very different, and it's actually becomes better when we learn with STEM and game-based learning.
Well, yeah, I think it's just more meaningful for the students. Great, I can read a story that's 100 years old and I can learn about history. And these are things that are valuable. But if I feel like I can, I don't know, build something, whether it's through robotics or design or computer science or whatever facet of STEM I'm engaging in, uh, I can create something that maybe may address some real world challenges that I might have in my community, whether that's, global warming issues, whether that's poverty, whether that's like accessibility and sustainability and food deserts that exist in certain communities, even here in the city. And so I think if kids feel like they can have a real world impact on things that are important to them in their lives and in their communities, it's definitely more incentivized learning than just learning some abstract idea that doesn't connect to their real life.
Right. I think it's extraordinary the way you're working about the problems that are faced in society, like the near places around you. So, like, we need to work in that area just without just speaking about working the like entire world. So, if we start by working in our area, then we can start expanding and like make the environment better around us.
Well, I mean, I have to say, first off, I'm impressed by you because like, you started this, right? This whole podcast, and you're interviewing me now because you saw a need and you wanted to fill that need, and you are communicating probably more powerfully to people in your generation than I ever could because I'm just an old dude in New York City, right? Um, but to say that knowing that you have that impact probably incentivizes you to want to do this because it's yours. You own this. This is your passion, what you're diving into. And if we can tap into that for each of our students, I think it's going to make the learning that much more powerful.
Yeah, I think the need to do anything, like if you create any application or a startup, if the thing has a need, then it always going to get successful. So, like even when we learn our teachers, then they always tell us like you need to know the need of creating something. So that's a point that I agree upon.
Yeah, that's awesome. Always wanting to connect to the needs of the students. Yes, their needs for my students. Yes, their needs with a disability, right? And making it accessible to them where they're at, what they need, making it accessible to who they are in their family and their culture, sure, but also making it accessible to who they are as a human being and what they're passionate about. Yeah.
Right.
So it's all about like personalizing it. And if you don't have an answer to the question that a lot of kids might ask walking into your classroom, like, why do I have to know this? Why do we have to learn this? If you don't have an answer to that question, well, you need to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
As a teacher.
Agreed.
And be able to respond to that for students. And it
Yeah.
shouldn't just be because I said so.
Yeah, because I said so. It's a very weird answer. Right. So I have a question for you that you love to experiment digital tools and learn how to inspire creativity in every student using STEM and game-based learning. So can you throw light upon that?
I'll do my best. So yeah, creativity should be at the top of all the types of learning that we're doing. I mean, logistically, it's the top of Bloom's taxonomy and it's the highest level of learning. So kids who are just doing rote memorization tasks, are they really getting it? Slightly. But kids who are building and creating and making things, like that's top level learning. These are kids who are going to remember it going forward, remember what you taught them, remember how to engage in this in the real world. And even better, maybe they're creating solutions to real world to that point. I have had students creating ideas before we were in the pandemic. They were building robotic systems to think about how to clean New York waterways and improve our water filtration systems and stuff. But since we've been in the pandemic, we've gotten to do it in interesting new ways. So yes, we could send plants and seeds home to them so we can continue our gardening program in their apartments. But also we dove into like Minecraft and we had our first giant Minecraft challenge citywide Battle of the Burrows this past year, where students were in Minecraft trying to solve real world challenges of, okay, how do we have more sustainable transportation systems here in the city? How can we build better schools? And what's awesome about that is if you start from a place of empowering creativity with the students, you're not sitting there looking for a specific answer, a specific response. You're giving a goal. You're giving, an idea surrounding the topic. But the schools, the perfect schools that these students were building in Minecraft would not have been what I would have built as my perfect school. In fact, they were probably way better because there were concepts they found in their social structures, like, hey, here's a space where kids can just gather together and chat about stuff, and look, there's wide open windows and you have access to gardens and fresh air, and it's, I wouldn't have thought to put that necessarily in my school, but now I want that in my school if I'm ever going to build one. And these ideas and concepts that they have, by simply giving them the chance to get hands-on and address something that's meaningful to them, I think it has to do with motivation. And I think that's huge for game-based learning. So much of school is all this like external, extrinsic stuff, like here's an A or some grade for something, or here's a sticker, or here's a Skittle that they give to students with autism in my district, almost in a Pavlovian response, like an animal, right? Here's a thing, do this thing, back and forth, which, is okay in the short term, maybe, right? Of getting somebody to be moderately productive. But all the studies show that in the long term, it doesn't work, and it kills creativity. Whereas like that's intrinsic stuff, the sort of like, I feel passionate about this. I feel a connection to the other kids that I'm working with. I feel a connection to the teachers. I feel like I accomplished something in a given day. That kind of stuff. I feel like I was able to socialize. Whatever it is that motivates students, different things motivate different students. But if it's internalized, if it's that sort of intrinsic motivation, I think if we can get our students to there instead of all that external stuff, I think that'll really push them forward to try to achieve.
Right, that's amazing. I mean, I think the way you said creativity should be at the top because creating actually helps you to remember everything that you do. That's what you said. And I agree with that because if you create something on your own and you start your own venture, it helps you to remember everything. It's not you just following anybody's path and going on that. When you create something on your own, it helps you to think from different ways and then fix the problems which you might not have noticed before. But when you're creating on your own, you can fix them easily because you're able to capture that problem. And I love Minecraft, the way you're using it for real world challenges, as we're facing the COVID-19 pandemic right now, and other things like waste management. We have pollution, and we have so many other things going in the world. So we do speak it out, but I think when we see it visually, it is able to connect with us as well, as we can get those ideas very early and grasp it quite properly. And when those ideas come together, we do create something meaningful. And even if the students are creating, I think, like you said, the motivation is very important from the educator, so that like whenever they feel down, they can get the motivation from the teacher that okay, no problem, if something went wrong, you can always recreate that. And when you have the connection with the teacher and with the other students you're collaborating with, it does help you to accomplish. So I love the way you've explained all the things about that.
Yeah, I mean, that connection piece is huge. I've always thought that the first rule of good teaching was knowing your students well,
Right.
right? And yes, that's about building relationships, but it's also about, one, yes, I need to know where they are academically to know how I can help them get to where they need to be,
Mhm.
but also knowing who they are socially, personally, emotionally. I can dive in and get to those needs. And I think a point you made about all those important things we're addressing, whether it's waste management, whether it's, sustainability, whatever matter the students are trying to tackle, I think it's awesome that they get these, I guess we'll call them safer spaces in the classroom, where they can experiment with it and they can fail, and they can fail big. Like they can have these moonshot ideas like, hey, what about if we send all those garbage cans with rockets up into space and then we just throw all that well, I don't know if that's a good idea. Let's see what would happen if we did that. And we can explore and see why maybe that's not the best idea for it. But like, let them have those like moonshot ideas, because maybe one of those that they come up with is going to be like, wow, no, that is amazing. That I didn't ponder that. That might work. Let's try to make this happen. And
Mhm.
so that safe space to, get a little wild and experiment and mess up. And then after you messed up, you're like, that didn't work. Good. Now I know one thing that doesn't work. We can put that aside and we'll try to find something else that does. And having a sort of safe space for students to experiment like that, I think, is huge, especially when you're diving into creative or project-based learning activities, especially in STEM.
Right, and that's why we say that teamwork is dream work, because when we work in team, we do like wonders. Because anybody, we all think from different perspectives. On one topic, we have different versions of our own solutions, and when we combine them, it is like a big rocket of ideas that we create.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've seen that come to life in reality, where you know this final robot design we had for like cleaning waterways and stuff. One student has this suction method that they've got up front that works, but then where's the storage? Another student has that idea, and another student has a backlog of the things that it might have missed for smaller filtration particles. And like to individually, each of them had an all right idea. Collectively, they had an amazing idea,
Mm-hmm.
and so I love that. Yeah, and the fact that they got to work together on it for these students who are very social made it all the better an overall experience too.
That's good to know. So I was browsing braveintheattempt.com. That's your website. So please, can you tell us about that?
I'm trying to remember. I set that up maybe, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago or something like that. And originally, I set it up as a space for myself. I set it up as a place where I could put my ideas and my resources and sometimes like just spew some cathartic nonsense to make me feel better about what I was thinking about education and the things that I didn't see happening that I wish would. Uh, Strangely, in the midst of that, okay, maybe if I put a series of references that I could share with teachers, that'd be good. Um, and over some time, there were certain ideas that I put on there that seemed to spread, and so that have become popular in places, especially in the ideas of project-based learning, or hey, how do you create a quality lesson plan, or how do you dive deep into artistic creativity digitally with students. And then again, never an expectation. Some of it's technology, some of it's personal philosophy. I never expected it to be viewed by many people, but now that I have people from countries I've never been to, like the Philippines, let's say, reaching out to me, educators from there saying, "Hey, we really like these resources. We'd actually like to use them across our district for our students. Can we?" And I'm like, "That's awesome. I had no idea that I could have that sort of impact because you never really know, right? Of what value anything you put out there is ultimately. But it's cool to hear that, wow, even if I've never been to a place, something I put out into the world maybe can have some sort of positive impact. It's good to know that you might have done some good, I guess.
Yeah, and I think like it's quite surprising, like when you create like a space for yourself, and then you saw the problems and you wanted to give the solutions to them. So then you put some references for the educators, and they started coming to you and asking you about the resources. So that's like the way you said, the values that you put out to the world come back to you, and hard work that you do for the references that you created does come back to you. So it's all interlinked, like you're doing it for the better good, and it is coming back to you. So it is like about the karma, I think.
I mean, it is a space. I made a rule when I first did it, and again, it's that I was never going to put advertisements on it or anything like that because it was my goal was never a profit. My goal was just to share ideas that I had with anybody who was out there that I could, and that's still my goal. And so it's strange to me the things that become popular on there too. So yes, people care about effective assessment for education and uh, future ready thinking and teaching students about the 7 C's of future ready learning. But one of the things that became the most popular was a strange rant I had in response to things that I saw people older even than me posting on like social media and stuff, talking about, oh, kids today, here's the problem with kids today, and I'll tell you why kids are terrible, and the cell phones and all the things that they do and they can't. Okay. And I listened to these rants, and first off, they sounded the same as the sort of rants I heard when I was a kid, and the sort of rant like every generation. And when you look it up, you can find people complaining about how uh, back in the 1800s, novels are ruining kids. Kids are reading these long novels that are fiction, and it's ruining their spirits, and TV ruined kids and movies and all the other. And so I wrote a whole rant about like, oh yeah, what a good point you're saying. Here's how things are being ruined for kids today. Oh, by the way, kids today do less drugs than kids in the past, in self-governance, in caring for the environment and the community, donations that never happened before. That's what kids are doing today. Oh, but also, at least in America, kids are facing more poverty than they ever did before, worse climate impact, higher likelihood of violence happening in our school buildings, of getting hurt there. So all these things are happening that are hurting kids because of things adults have done before them. Meanwhile, kids are, in most measurements, doing better than ever before, and yet they have to put up with adults telling them, sorry, you're all terrible, we don't trust you, and you should just listen to us because we know better. Meanwhile, a lot of people of my generation and older have proven we don't necessarily know better, and you doing things like this, showing the way, is essentially proof of that.
Right. I think as people say that the forefathers of the country or anybody else in the past has done so much for the country, and now is the turn of the youth to give back to them. So it's quite important for that, but also it's quite vital for the youth to not get um, they think that they have power, and just because they're living in this generation they know better. I think the ones who are in the previous generations, they know actually better than us. They do, because they have experienced certain failures and hard work that they did. So it is not always to just say that we are living in society where we know about the galaxy now, nothing about that. They might not know about that, but they do know the experiences in life, because they face a situation, so they can guide you better upon that. So it is always important to respect your elders.
Yeah, it is. It's an important balance, to be sure. You know, I I I think there's an importance to respect all people, to be certain. So yes, respecting our elders, but also being willing to question errors that I've made, that my colleagues have made. I was the student who didn't always automatically trust that my teacher knew it was right, and I don't know, maybe 70% of the time they did. But there were times where it was worth questioning, because clearly we grow and we learn from generation to generation about how to be better and more inclusive human beings as it stands. At least that is my hope, I suppose.
That's so good to know about that. So I wanted to ask you another question. That even I advocate game-based learning in whenever I'm using that together. So can you share some of the great games that you have used with students and teachers to
Sure.
engage learners and empower student voice?
So, yes, empowering my students' voices is huge, especially because of the type of students I work with. A lot of times they are not always given that space for their voice. A lot of times they're disregarded uh, because of their disability, because they literally don't have a verbal voice, but they definitely have stuff to say. So even though they may communicate in a different method, whether it's American Sign Language, whether it's through an app or communication system, they still have powerful stories and information to share. So what Grid Games is me taking what I love about Flipgrid, which is that whole communication piece and the ability to share and empower student voices, taking that other piece I love, which is just game-based learning, and sort of mashing them up together. And so through that, we get to have that sort of playful learning, but I get to have students communicate about the learning as they go. And I've done a whole bunch of things with it. Simple things with students, like in math class, we do rebus puzzles, or which one doesn't belong, and whether that's emojis or shapes or angles, depending on what we're studying. Estimysteries, where it's just general estimation games, sort of like guessing games, but two more expansive ones where it gets into like board games you might have played, from like Pictionary and Clue, and drawing games. But then when it gets really awesome is when we do sort of design challenges, which are sort of competitive in there, or like Minecraft challenges in there. And I think my students, a lot of our favorites, and one of my favorite to overview, is when we do digital escape rooms. I don't know. Are you familiar with digital escape rooms, Namya? Yeah.
Yes, I
Uh,
am.
they're, I don't know what it's like for you, and if there's escape rooms, physical ones there in India near where you are, but where I am in New York City, yes, there are. They've been closed recently, a lot of them because of the pandemic, but Digital ones, you don't lock a kid in a room because I guess they don't want you to do that, of course, right? But you can create a digital one in a space using Flipgrid or a Google form, or there's a few methods that I explain on my site to do it. And students get to dive into a challenge, whether it's in math or history or whatever it is we're studying, and explore it by trying to find the clues that'll unlock these things. And they have to collaborate and work together, and they have to think through these challenges in creative ways. So we're testing creativity, we're testing their communication skills, we're testing their critical thinking skills, and all of this in a sort of fun, playful environment. So I just think it helps students. And even when they don't break out, I usually in the first ones make them easy enough so they do. But after a while, they might get challenging enough that they can't. It helps them sort of redefine that failure again, where the exploration and the finding the space and the learning that happens throughout is the real victory, not so much whether you unlocked it or not. Right?
That's incredible. And I love the way you using emoji shapes and different angles for communication and also for creating engagement. And I personally love Minecraft ideas that you're completely using, and also the challenges that you put forth for enhancing the forces, and also like giving the students a taste of failure, because that's another step to success. So it's very important that we learn how to fail so that we can succeed in life, because everything isn't just succeeding, succeeding, succeeding. It is very important to fail once so that you come back to the root level and then you restart and create something that was better than before.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that they didn't stop at like the iPhone 1, right? Because
Hmm.
it's even if it's a good thing that people like, it's all about reiteration and making it better.
Yeah,
Speaking of Minecraft, though, maybe at some point you and me and my kids, we can all get together and play some Minecraft. That'd be fun.
sure. I'd love to do that. So I wanted to ask you that, are you fond of reading?
Am I fond of reading?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love to read. I mean, my favorite kinds of books are usually like fantasy and science fiction type of
Yeah.
literature. What kind of books are you into?
I'm more like into like I used to read a lot of mystery books and fiction, but now I'm more into nonfiction books, which are more about like life and how you can be inspired. Like I'm recently reading the book The Alchemist by Paulo
Oh,
Coelho.
yeah.
I
Paulo Coelho.
Yeah, I love that book. I'm currently reading it, and I like my favorite mystery and non-fiction book is the Harry Potter series, which I completely love, and also Sherlock Holmes. So, which is your favorite
Okay. That's an interesting mix from like Coelho, which is more like a how to live your lifestyle, to like the playfulness of Harry Potter. Oh well, then I have to ask you, which house are you in Harry Potter?
book? Gryffindor.
You're a Gryffindor. Okay, I'm more of a Ravenclaw myself,
Oh, nice.
but all right, we get along.
So, which is your favorite book?
Oh gosh, that's a really hard question. I mean, I know the books that I've read the most, enjoyed over my life. Like I said, I loved the Lord of the Rings series, which
Oh,
is such a nerdy book, and I dove into like the Cimmerillion and all that kind of stuff. Like I said, I love fantasy literature.
mhm.
You know, I mean, even though they haven't been finished yet, I loved all the Game of Thrones books and Way of Kings and Name of the Wind and all these other sort of like fantasy stories. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I wish I had been born in like another time in like the Middle Ages or another place or something. But like maybe I'd be a wizard. I don't
Yeah,
know.
like if you've read the series of like Percy Jackson and other books,
Mm.
so that just makes me think like I wanted to be like a demigod. I wanted to be like a half Egyptian god. So that like is very interesting according to me. When you read those books, it feels like you're the character and you're living that book.
Yeah. And well, and then it pulls in like aspects of actual history and
Mhm.
spaces, but then it throws in like a dash of fantasy things that aren't,
Right.
exactly how it was, to just make us imagine a world. Sometimes it's harder in some ways, and sometimes it's better in other ways. And like,
Mhm.
how can we make our worlds the kind of world we want to be in?
Right. So I would love to hear from you the connection of music and social and emotional learning, according to you.
So I actually started out in teaching as a music teacher, and I play a whole bunch of instruments. And so this is going to be really nerdy, but back in university, I did a whole study on the nature of music and its work with students with autism. For example, uh, music hits a different part of the brain than language does. So I will have students who can sing a song but can't speak a sentence, or I will have students who can retain information musically, and this happens with a lot of, I guess, cognitively normative people too, but songs that help you remember stuff, whereas just telling somebody can't. So you learn and you sing the song when you're a kid to help you remember important facts and information. And so music just hits differently in that way. And we've all had music that was meaningful to us, whether, again, you haven't lived, the length that I have, but maybe when you've experienced like, or different moments of importance in your life, there's usually like a song connected to it in your brain that like, and every time you hear that song, you remember those emotions and those feelings and connect. And we all have songs that we listen to like pump ourselves up and feel energized, and songs like when we're not feeling great that we just like to wallow in. And so music is powerful in connecting to those areas of the brain meaningfully and to learning. And I think teachers are realizing more and more, especially in the midst of the pandemic, how important the value is of social emotional connections and social emotional learning is with students, and teaching how to behave as a good human being in society, but also how to compose yourself during hard times and hardships and difficult challenges. And then music can play a role in connecting to those experiences in a way that maybe we might struggle with if words were all we had available to us. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of ways music can be powerful in learning, especially when it's connected to social emotional spaces.
Right. So singing does help you remember. So like if you're not able to like learn something, for example, we have the first 20 elements in chemistry in the periodic table. So you actually can create like a kind of mnemonym if you're not able to learn that, or you can just sing hydrogen, helium, lithium, like create some song out of it so you can remember. And songs does help you to express emotions, because when you're listening, if you're like uh kind of down, you can listen to inspiring songs, and then you get the inspiration back and you start working. So like I completely agree upon that point, and it indirectly helps you in social and emotional learning, so you become better at learning as well at the same time when you listen to music.
Yeah. Well, there's also studies that say, and again, not that like testing is ever the goal in education, but even if your goal is just to, do well on a particular test you have to take at the end of the year or something, simply studying and taking the test while certain types of music, especially like classical music and stuff, plays, has been shown to help people score better
Right.
just by having it in
So
the background.
yeah, where can we find you online so that our audience watching us can contact you?
So on Twitter, I am Sean M. Arnold, SeanMarnold. And as you mentioned, the site braveintheattempt.com. You can find me there and send me an email straight away from there. Yeah, those are probably the two best ways to find me on the internet.
Thank you for that. And before we sign off, we would love to have a message that you would like to give to the audience.
Um, I think my message, yes, in learning, I want teachers to connect to learning that's personally meaningful to their students and intrinsically motivating and made for all and inclusive. But I think specifically, having spoken with you now, Namya, I think I want to let anyone listening know that it is clear that there are many challenges facing the future we have ahead of us. STEM can hopefully play a role in, for lack of a better term, stemming some of those challenges, like, helping us resolve them. And it's going to be up to the younger generation, people like Namya, to help us find real solutions to address those needs that are impacting us and impacting the world now. So, do everything you can to share with them that knowledge that you may possess, but also give them the freedom to explore and challenge and encourage them when they're doing awesome stuff like Namya is now. So, yeah, that would be my final message.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sean. I was lovely connecting with you today, and I learned a lot from you the way you're using creativity with Minecraft and using motivate and also motivating your students, and then using music, great games, and many more things like empowering your students with student voice. And also, I loved listening from you about your favorite book. So, thank you so much for giving your precious time to us today, and see you soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for joining us and listening to this episode. I'll see you on the next one. Till then, each one teach 10. Have a nice day.